Hi, my name is Mary Lee Bauma. I'm a local Vancouver resident. And I want to say thank you to all four of you. I liked the variety in your presentations, and I liked your respectful tone. And my question is, what could a couple of the panelists speak to? What do we do next? Assuming we agree with the presentations together that you gave us, what can we do next as local Vancouver residents? Thank you.
Great question. Please, somebody. We only have a few more minutes for our television broadcast.
So what we're advocating, and a vehicle to do that would be through the Buying Sex is Not a Sport campaign, but whatever you'd like, is to urge our government, meet with your representative, write letters on implementing the model where the sold are decriminalized and the buyers are criminalized. So we would love to see Canada take a truly progressive approach and move towards the model, the Nordic model. This is very, very doable. It's very, very doable. So we have various resources for people. We have postcards that we're actually out of, but they say Canada can do better for prostituted women. And then they have information on the back about why brothels aren't a good idea and what women do need. So I would encourage you to send those to your MPs and then meet with them and talk to them about this. They're getting these cards, they're hearing our message. Another thing you could do at a local level is just start urging elected officials and the police to actually prosecute the Johns. So they're not prosecuting the women so much in Vancouver right now, which is terrific, but we have a de facto legalization decrim because they're also not prosecuting the Johns. So those are some two really practical things you can do to create change.
Yeah, wonderful.
I think another really practical thing people can do is if you're a part of a group, any kind of group, if you're a part of a union, if you're a part of some form of social group, get consensus within the group that prostitution is violence against women, and move forward with that because there's strength in numbers. And there's things like the One Is Too Many Summit that happened here in Vancouver that people can sign on to. They have a declaration online that people can sign on to and support women organizations that are doing this, like Rape Relief as well. Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Shelter, they have a feminist perspective, and we need to make sure that voice stays in this conversation because this is about women's issues. So those are just some of my suggestions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Our next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Naomi Brunnemeyer, and I'm a volunteer with Pivot Legal Society Sex Workers Human Rights Campaign.
Right.
I am really hoping that you were honest with your concept of dialogue because I'm actually going to come with some different questions in a different frame of mind.
Absolutely.
So Pivot Legal Society currently is in the middle of an appeal on our charter challenge. We challenged the adult prostitution laws under the Constitution, saying that they were violating the rights of sex workers. And so currently that's before the courts. And I've heard a lot of conversation today about the Swedish model, about criminalizing the Johns. So currently in Canada, we have a quasi-decriminalized state, but there are still things that you can be charged against. And so our contention is that that leads to sex workers not being able to control their work environment. They have to work in isolated places. They have to work in the dark. They can't work indoors. They can't have access to safety. They can't do referrals for each other. They can't work together. All of these laws work together to do that. So my question is that the parliamentary subcommittee, our government said that our laws are an abject failure on what their goals were to be. So whether you think their goals were to be a deterrent for young women entering the trade, whether they were supposed to be a deterrent for men buying sex, whether they were about public nuisance, that they are not working. So my question is, if we really do care about the safety of sex workers, how does criminalizing the client help them?
Okay, good question. And don't go away because I think we need to hear a little bit more about the pivot position.
It's a lonely place to be.
No, we welcome you.
So from my understanding, the question was, how does criminalizing the John keep the prostituted woman safe? I ask that I won't say the word sex worker. I find it incredibly insulting, like somehow what was happening was a fair exchange of goods and services or something. It will help keep the prostituted women safe, which are my friends who are still currently working, by making sure they're arrested before they get in the front door to abuse them in any way. making sure the Johns are held accountable for their actions and their violence and their opinions of what women are for, makes sure that they're not walking in the front door. I worked indoors, I worked outdoors, I worked the downtown east side, I worked all over, and it was never the location that was the problem. It was always the men who were beating me. And so the safest way is to make sure that they can't enter anywhere to take advantage of the women by using their money and their power to further degrade them.
Before we have our next speaker, because the Pivot Legal Society, I think were challenging me a little earlier today in some emails. So, but I do want, I was quite serious. I do want to hear the view of Pivot, and I think it would be helpful for all of us if we could just have a moment from you about if Pivot had a magic wand, how would you change the system? What would you, that's different from what we've heard from these four speakers? Could you just give us a moment of that, and then we'll go to our next speaker? What would Pivot do if you had the control of Parliament?
Well, the first thing that we would do is we are looking to decriminalize the current laws. So we make a difference between decriminalize and legalize. So decriminalize is actually repealing the current legislative framework around adult sex work. Legalization is what regulations would look like. So I'm not suggesting, I'm sitting here saying it should be brothels, it should be this. Our next steps would be to actually consult with sex workers and find out what it was that sex workers would like. So a number of them have indicated that they'd like to work in a co-op model, that they would like a brothel, that they would like various areas of the city to be designated an entertainment district. So I'm not saying we have the solution, and absolutely that is the question, but right now we feel that it is an epidemic of violence against women as a result of the laws, and so the first stage is to actually repeal the current laws and then to look at how we can build safety in. Our goal would be to have no legislation, no regulations that came in that was punitive, because we feel that any form of criminalization, whether it be on the client side or on the sex worker side, actually causes more harm.
Okay, thank you. I think it's important that we heard that. Now, please, your name and your thoughts.
Sure. What's kind of changed since then, there's been a few inaccuracies. One thing is there's really no difference between... What is your name? Daisy. I work at Rape Relief and Women's Shelter, and I really think Pivot does some very good work, and this is not one of them. So if you agree, this is a mistaken path that Pivot has taken, and it's a blow to women's equality. So I hope that if you don't understand Pivot's position, it is to take all the laws off the books and make the free market and capitalism the controlling agent of women. So it's you can make it pretty by saying it's the laws that are doing the violence against women, but we know it's the men that are doing the violence against women. So I fully support the idea of decriminalizing the women and keeping the laws on the backs of the men, the pimps, the procurers, and the traffickers. The question that I have, and there's a lot of stereotypes and myths, and Tricia, you hit a